All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, wherever and whenever you are to this launch webinar for TransitionZero's Solar Asset Mapper, or TZSAM. My name is Lucas. I'm the CTO of TransitionZero, and I'll be our moderator for today. Our tagline today is how planetary scale machine learning can improve data quality for energy transition planning. We're going to show you some incredible work by our machine learning team using satellite data and machine learning to locate every single utility scale solar energy facility in the world. And let's get started. So first, who is TransitionZero? TransitionZero TZ is a London-based climate tech not-for-profit. We were established 3 years ago with founding grants from google.org, ECF, QCF, and a couple others. We build open and accessible software tools and data sets to support the energy transition. And I'm joined today by Joe O'Connor, who leads our machine learning team and who led this work. And we are absolutely delighted to have Jenny Chase on the call with us today for a discussion. She's the lead solar analyst at BloombergNEF, and she's a prolific, insightful, and witty commentator on solar energy and the energy transition. And finally, we have Diren Kocakuşak from the Global Energy Monitor, who's going to discuss GEM's role in the preparation of this data set and the partnership GEM and TransitionZero have going forward. So I'm going to kick us off with a little bit of background into this research, why it's interesting and necessary, and why TransitionZero specifically has chosen to do it. I'm going to pass the control then to Joe, who's going to give us an overview of the methodology and highlights of the data. Diren will then discuss how we're going to produce this data set going forward in partnership with the Global Energy Monitor. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jenny as a user of solar energy data to get us started with the Q&A, digging into anything that we've missed and grilling us on the quality of our data. Just some housekeeping, there is a Q&A feature, so please drop any questions that you have in there and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar, or we're happy to follow up after. Please keep yourself muted while not speaking, or I'm sure someone lurking in the shadows will fly in and mute you. A recording will be available after the webinar, so you can of course go back and enjoy it for a second time. So let's begin. What is TZSAM? TZSAM is an open access global asset level data set of commercial and utility scale solar energy facilities. We use medium resolution Earth observation data, that's satellite data, and machine learning to build a data set at scale, at planetary scale to be more specific, and we enrich this data set with analysis ready features, like estimates of nominal generating capacity on a facility level basis and the construction date of those facilities. And I'll leave it to Joe to give more detail on the data set specifics. Detecting solar facilities from space isn't new. The first global survey of this kind was done by me with collaborators at the University of Oxford, World Resource Institute, and Descartes Labs a couple of years ago. We in turn were inspired by colleagues at Stanford who did a survey of the contiguous United States. And there have been other academic contributions sort of going back to 2016, various deployment geographies or various deployment techniques that have now sort of led to this era of being able to do full planetary work. And this is sort of aligned with developments in computer vision technologies and, of course, the engineering and data technology that we require to be able to deploy at this scale. And I'm very glad to say that we've now been surpassed entirely by Joe and his team. They've outdone us on every dimension. And this is now, I think, the first global deployment following up after an interim period. Why do we need facility level information? We all know, of course, we can get aggregated country level solar information if we'd like. We can get that from various governments or from the likes of IRENA, for example. But what's different about facility level information? The transition to a fully renewable energy system poses both operational and planning challenges that can only be addressed with precise geospatial data. So particularly for renewables, because the sun and wind are intermittent and inherently geospatial, in order to design, build, and operate a new energy system, we need to know the exact latitudes and longitudes of the energy producing facilities. So there are a ton of applications that we've been thinking about. The engineering applications, so grid balancing, connection planning, managing curtailment and grid congestion and the like. Markets, of course, so being able to nowcast and forecast electricity dispatch. And then policy making. How effective are policies in encouraging the diffusion of solar energy technology? And then what are the adverse side effects, perhaps, of the deployment of solar energy technology? So impacts on biodiversity, land conservation priorities. How do we inform those conversations and the trade-offs as we look at climate targets and other land and conservation priorities? So this data set is extremely useful, but why has TransitionZero decided to build and maintain this data set? We're building a no-code interface for energy systems modeling. So this is the same suite of tools that are used by the IEA, for example, to produce their annual energy outlooks, or the UK National Grid, for example, to assess grid resilience. We're packaging this up into a web-based tool we're calling Model Builder. And in order to have that batteries included experience, we need to have world-leading asset level data available on this platform. And so that's what we've produced here with TZ-SAM. So I'm going to pass the torch now to Joe, who is going to get into the details of the data, our methodology, and how we're going to produce it going forward. So Joe, I am sharing with you the control.
Great, I hope this works. Thanks a lot, Lucas. Yeah, so we started this project back in early 2023, so it's very exciting to be able to finally be sharing it with people. So we start with some motivation. I think Lucas gave some examples just now of some use cases for solar data. TransitionZero uses it internally, and we know that existing asset level solar data providers face some challenges. They have a big job on their hands. So this graph on the right shows part of the story. This shows the proliferation of solar capacity around the world. And so problem number one is that solar is growing very, very fast. It's really hard to keep up with traditional research and keep track of everything that's being built. The thing that's also hidden in here is that there's a very, very long tail of small solar installations that's even harder to keep track of. So monitoring very, very large, small numbers of very, very large installations is relatively tractable. Monitoring tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of small utility scale and smaller solar installations is basically impossible or very expensive. So this leads to our version of the cheap, fast, good triangle. For solar data, timely, granular, and complete. Top-down data providers like IRENA provide a very complete version of the data. Top-down estimates at the country level of solar capacity, but next to no granularity. So spatial granularity, country level only, and a reasonable amount of lag in that data. And asset level data providers, of which we always go to Global Energy Monitor. So Global Energy Monitor's Global Solar Power Tracker is the example we have here. Are very granular. They track things at the asset level, but incomplete. And you can see this capacity gap also in the plot on the right hand side. And so we think that machine learning can be used to sort of square this triangle and produce timely, granular, and complete asset level solar data. Oh, I'm trying to click. There we go. Okay. So onto our methodology. Firstly, we collect tens of thousands of images of solar farms using the Sentinel-2 satellite project, whose data is openly published by the European Space Agency. We then match this with open geometry data from OpenStreetMap. So OpenStreetMap has tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of annotated outlines of solar farms. And we combine them to train a machine learning model. So the machine learning paradigm used to take an image of something and generate one of these sort of heat maps from it is called semantic segmentation. We train deep semantic segmentation models on this training set of satellite and geometry data to then predict outlines of solar farms from an arbitrary satellite image. And finally, we then apply that model to the entire world. So this is where planetary scale comes in. This model processes over 100 terabytes of data and consumes around 10,000 CPU hours per run. And actually, subsequent to that, there's a step that's missed here, which is human validation. So any detection that makes it all the way into our final published dataset is then looked at visually by a human being in Sentinel-2 satellite imagery to confirm that that it is real and to improve the purity of the final dataset. So what we end up with after that is a collection of locations and shapes of solar farms around the world. This data is not that useful on its own, and so we enrich it in a couple of ways with two further machine learning models. The first one is a model for capacity date estimation. This is not much of a model in its own right, but rather a reapplication of our detection and segmentation model. So for any validated solar detection, we gather images of that location as far back in time as we can. And so what you can see in this slide is a picture of a relatively large solar farm over multiple years. So the past is on the left and today-ish is on the right. And we just apply our segmentation model to each image and have a look at where the plant first appears. You can see visually in the second frame the land being cleared to be built on, and then in the third frame the solar farm suddenly appearing. And so just applying some simple statistical analysis to this time series allows us to bound the construction date of the plant as being between the date of the second and third image in this case. Secondly, and most crucially, we estimate capacities for every detection. And so luckily, the capacity of a solar farm is very strongly related to its size. It's directly correlated with the surface area of the solar panels and strongly correlated with the ground area of the plant, which is what we detect. And typically, in Lucas's work, for example, and in other studies, people will just take the detected area of the plant, scale it by some global multiplicative factor to get to an estimate for its capacity. So you can say something like 1 square kilometer of solar farm equals roughly 30 to 60 megawatts. So I think you have to sort of pick a number in that range. We noticed that there were differences in the typical power densities of solar farms in different countries. I think Lucas actually noted this in his paper also. And with the help of Global Energy Monitor, who hired an annotator to help with this task, we were able to put together a data set that demonstrates this effect. So what we can see in this graph is basically the power density of a typical solar farm in a number of different countries. And what this plot in particular shows is that the density of a solar farm in the Netherlands is atypically high, is much higher than in the USA. And we see these effects. Certain countries stand out and just build more tightly packed solar farms. And you can also see this general trend of larger solar farms being slightly more sparsely constructed. So the yellow bars here are 10 megawatt plus plants, and the blue bars are 0 to 1 megawatt plants, very small utility scale. And so this data set allows us to construct a slightly more sophisticated capacity model. We take the area of the plant, we take the country that it's located in, and we generate country-specific capacity scaling models to generate our final capacity estimates. And so onto the data set itself. As promised, it's timely, granular, and complete with an asterisk. So we still have a gap between our data set and IRENA's. But the graph on the right shows the additional levels of coverage we achieve on smaller plants. So there's quite a few things to unpack in this plot. It's shown in our methodology document, but the dark blue bars are the total capacities of TZ-SAM's detections in different size bins. So the rightmost is very, very large utility scale solar, and the lighter blue bars are Global Energy Monitor's global solar power trackers estimates. And while we roughly match in these large bins, give or take some capacity estimation uncertainties, we make a very large number of detections or enrichments at 10 megawatts or below. So we find or enrich 50,000 plus solar farms below 10 megawatts. Our methodology also allows us to update the data set relatively regularly, given the reduced manual labor of finding plants. And this is a reworked graphic from the TZ-SAM explainer, showing the geographical distribution of our detections. So we find or enrich 63,616 assets, of which 14,000 are not found in any other open asset level solar data set. The rest are existing open data that we enrich with capacity and construction date information. So what's next? Firstly, well, it's not next. We have already seen the data published via Global Energy Monitor, who incorporated our predictions in our detections in Europe into the June 2024 Global Solar Power Tracker. Upcoming is integration into TransitionZero's model builder, which Lucas introduced earlier, no code interface for energy systems modeling. And within the machine learning team, we have a list of methodological upgrades. So we're expecting in the next runs to see more facilities, more accurate capacities, and more accurate and granular construction date estimations. I think that brings my methodology section to a close. Thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Lucas.
Great, thank you, Joe. Taking back my control here. Okay, now let's go to our panelists. So first, I'm going to invite Diren to come in, tell us a little bit about GEM and GEM's role in TZ-SAM and how we're going to work together going forward. And then over to Jenny to kick us off with some Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing the screen as well so we can all see each other. But Diren, first over to you. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. I'll try to keep it short so we'll have time for Q&A. Thanks for again inviting me for the webinar, and once again, congrats for releasing this solar asset mapper a couple of weeks ago. We've been, GEM and TransitionZero have been discussing this project for a while, but we've been more closely collaborating over the last year or so. And I'm really excited to see the outcome of this collaboration, being shared publicly. As Joe mentioned, we started this collaboration by producing a data set of solar projects that really serves a representative inventory for projects in target areas of interest. We assisted TransitionZero labeling polygons and providing some extra information for for these facilities. And then this data set is later used for training and enhancing TransitionZero's machine learning algorithm. But maybe I can briefly also mention some of the challenges we face at GEM and how this potentially could address those challenges. At GEM's Global Solar Power Tracker, we compile project by project, ground-up inventory of solar installations, and we provide about 30 attributes for each project. Recently, we expanded our coverage to include projects down to 1 megawatt, and it became quickly difficult to provide a complete and accurate data due to increasing number of smaller scale solar projects. Joe briefly mentioned this. As we start paying more attention to smaller projects, the number of these projects gets higher and higher. But on top of that, we provide publicly available references for each of our attributes. Our data needs to be based on public resources, and typically on our site, this looks like comprehensive, government data sets. We consider those as like golden resources, and but the availability of these reliable resources is limited. Lucas was also, mentioning the importance, the important contributions of this collaboration to like engineering, to energy markets, to policy making. And over the last couple of months, we've been hearing more and more about our common goal of tripling renewables. And we believe that providing granular information at the asset level, the work we do at GEM and this collaboration is really significant to say something about this target. And we believe TransitionZero's solar asset mapper addresses these challenges by providing exact locations and geometries to complete the global picture. And finally, in our recent release in June 2024, for our solar tracker, we started including outputs of solar asset mapper. And I'm happy to mention this collaboration is already helping us to fill the gaps for smaller installations in countries where these reliable data resources are limited. I'll pass it back to Lucas, and we can have some time for Q&A.
Great, thank you so much, Diren. Let's jump right into it. Jenny, over to you. You want to tell us a little bit about your role at BNEF, and then lead us in some Q&A. Let's get into it.
Hi, so I founded the solar team at what is now BloombergNEF, and I founded that in 2006. And then my job was super easy because there were only about 12 countries installing solar. Now there's at least 146 countries installing solar, and probably more. And the official data is rubbish. I cannot tell you how uncertain we are about how much solar there is actually out there. So I'm generally kind of somewhat interested in this satellite data stuff because I don't actually care where the assets are as a general rule, but I do care how many solar modules go out into the market. And you would think that this sort of methodology was way too inexact to help you with that, and it is, but it's better than the absolute nothing that we have. A lot of the time what we're using is the export data from China to try and estimate how much a country like Pakistan might have installed. So it is somewhat helpful to have something that can run over the world and tell you why a country might have been buying solar modules. I have tried this solution before. I have spent some time this sort of thing before. I've spent some time labeling the assets myself. It was boring. It was also totally ineffective. But this one has found quite a lot of assets on the whole world. So that's actually quite impressive. Yeah, can I ask some questions?
Please, yeah.
What's the smallest solar project you can see?
Joe, you want to tell us about the size distribution?
I mean, you showed us some data on what the distribution you are detecting, which is obviously I've got to tell you that's totally different distribution that's actually out there. But what's the smallest one you can see at all?
Yeah, so the smallest that ends up in the data set is roughly 0.5 megawatts. That's not the smallest we can see. So the the absolute limit is the resolution of the satellite imagery, which is 10 meters. So 1 pixel is 100 square meters. However, we also have this challenge of manually validating every detection that we propose, which leads us to introduce an artificial cutoff at 10,000 meters squared, which is typically 0.5 to 1 megawatt. And that's because
so it's basically half a hectare.
Half a hectare.
So I mean,
don't actually have a conversion in my head.
A very good rule of thumb is, well, a pretty good rule of thumb for most markets is that it's about 2 megawatts per hectare.
Yeah. So we think we can go lower. You can't go below 100 square meters. Well, not with free and open imagery. You can go below the threshold that we've artificially introduced by adding a lot more manual work of validating these smaller detections, although it gets harder to identify things by eye at that size anyway.
Okay, and how do you deal with things like greenhouses? I mean, how can your model tell the difference between a greenhouse, which is basically glass, and a solar panel, which is basically glass, it's just got some dirt in it?
It's a great question. We absolutely hate greenhouses. And they're something that have constantly tripped up the model, for one. So the model proposes lots of detections that are actually greenhouses, but has also tripped up manual annotators, because often they can really mimic not just the appearance, but also the structure of solar farms. And so part of the solution has been to just get very good at identifying, at distinguishing between greenhouses and solar farms by eye. The other part of the solution, which is not incorporated in the current run of TZ-SAM, but will be in upcoming releases, is an additional machine learning model trained specifically to include greenhouse data, examples of greenhouses, of which there are quite a few in OpenStreetMap. And we find that actually trained with the right data and trained with all 13 bands of Sentinel-2 imagery, so information outside of the visual spectrum, a machine learning model can actually distinguish between the two very, very effectively.
Interesting. And somebody, Harold Heymans, has also asked, which I'm also curious about, what about the orientation of solar farms? Because you should be able to see whether they're tracking or non-tracking by first of all the spacing between them, and secondly the whether they're east to west, whether they run east to west or north to south. Can you do that?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We don't do that. It's one of the things that's on our list of methodological improvements. So if we have the time and money, we will potentially do that, because it will really help with not just with providing tracking information as an additional column in the dataset, but also with improving capacity estimation, because obviously tracking solar farms with tracking are more sparsely laid out. They have a lower capacity, even if they have a higher capacity factor. So yes, we think we can detect those things. We have actually, in the labeling work that Global Energy Monitor did, we have quite a few thousand plants with labeled tracking information that we can use as a training set, but we haven't done it yet.
We're running just up against time, but I wonder if I could beg the panelists to stay on just for another couple minutes. And Jenny, if you have any more questions, or perhaps 1 or 2 more questions, or we could take some from the chat, and then we'll do a brief wrap up.
Does anyone else have any questions on the panel? Diren, did you have another one? Somebody has asked, sorry.
Yeah, I'll go on. I think I'm also going to reference the chat. Jenny, do you have one in particular?
How about, are you able to estimate the number of panels at each site in an aggregate? Because if we know the date, we could probably guess the efficiency a lot better, and therefore the megawattage, than we can from aggregate data.
The number of panels, no, we're not. But we can use, and I think this so speaks to Ethan Berkeley's question about including the efficiency in the capacity estimations. We can use our estimated construction dates to estimate the likely efficiency of the panels and use this as a variable in our capacity estimation model. Actually, this is something that we have not yet done that will also be included in future versions. But yes, typically, I mean, there's nearly, I think, a twofold difference in efficiency depending on whether your plant was built 20 years ago or today. So it makes a big difference.
This might be a bit of a personal question, but a big important thing for me is how small you can go down to, because in a lot of markets you just don't have many solar projects of that size, but you have a lot of small solar projects which you would not detect at all, and that obviously makes a huge difference. If we paid a lot of money, could you go down smaller?
We have this, we would like to go down smaller. We have a project in mind to go all the way down to rooftop residential solar, but this requires high resolution satellite imagery, which is prohibitively expensive for a company of our size. And so, yes, if we had the money, then we could run this for much smaller installations.
The problem I've always found is that nobody really cares about developing markets enough to spend the amount of money to get that data. It's really annoying. Somebody's saying that they, aside from greenhouses, they can see actual rice fields tagged as solar farms. Is there any way to report those errors?
Those can be reported, yeah, via our email channels. I would say, actually, if you're looking at the solar map that we publish, just triple check that it is actually an error, because especially in China, they're building solar on top of things very regularly. The high resolution base map that you're looking at is probably out of date. These things are being built very quickly. They're being built on top of ponds, on top of lakes, on top of rice fields sometimes. So there may really be a solar farm there that you can't see in whatever imagery you have. Most likely that there is. So we expect there to be a very small number of errors in the data set, but significantly less than 1% of the data that we publish should be wrong according to our calculations.
I think that's all the questions I have.
Great. I've just been trying to make sure we got to everybody in the chat. I see another one from Harold Haymans, comparing results to Alexon capacity data. I know we have cross-referenced the unique identifiers from Alexon. I'm not sure if that information is available in either our release or the GEM associated release. But it is it's something that maybe we could follow up separately on, because I believe we've done that work. And then adversarial network for some sort of downscaling. Yeah, I think you have to be careful when you invite machine learning models to potentially hallucinate what they might be seeing. You see all kinds of abrupt changes in season or abrupt changes in land cover with some of these types. So I think we've kept ourselves to sort of the conventional computer vision domain, which is you get the imagery at the right resolution and then you just train a semantic segmentation model. But I think there's better and better approaches for mitigating the hallucination effects with certain types of downscaling. So certainly I think something that we can be thinking of in the future. We're now 5 minutes past, so I just would like to thank everybody again. Thank Jenny and Diren for joining us for the chat today. I really enjoyed it. Would love to follow up with everybody more. You can find us on our socials, or you can find Joe or my email quite easily, I'm pretty sure. I think it's just our respective first names at TransitionZero.org. And yeah, big thank you again to Jenny and Diren. And with that, I'll sign off. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for providing this great data set.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.